This video is me putting my money where my mouth is, or at least trying to, in terms of soldering SMDs with inexpensive soldering equipment. So this is a follow-on video to the one where I showed you the $15.88 Walmart soldering iron. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to solder this SOIC. This is a SOIC-8 DS1307 real-time clock onto this little carrier board. And so the first thing that I do when I'm going to put these things into a breadboard, when these are intended for a breadboard, is I push the pins down flush. And that does a couple of things. Here for this video, it's going to give me better access with the soldering iron when I reach in with the soldering iron. But more importantly, it pushes the pins deeper down into the breadboard. So if you're using a cheap Chinese breadboard, it's going to go down in there and it's going to hold better. For this video, I am going to use liquid flux. You saw me just apply Kester 186 liquid flux there. I think it's important for SMDs, and it's important because I'm going to load the solder onto the iron, which is going to melt the flux in the solder, and then the flux is going to burn off. So when I actually go to apply it to the pin and the land, there's going to be no flux there to make it flow, and it's just not going to work. So I've got the chip placed. I'm going to hold it down. I need to get my solder in here where we can see it. So there's the solder. Got my soldering iron here. This is a cheap Chinese soldering iron again. And I'm going to clean it. Where'd my cleaner go? There it is. I'm going to clean my soldering iron tip, and then I'm going to tin it. Let's get the soldering iron tinned here. Tin the soldering iron. Oh, it's a mess. All right, I'm going to shake off the loose solder. There we go. All right, so the soldering iron's ready to go. And what I'm going to need to do here is I'm going to need to just touch that, just to get a little bit of solder on it. I'm going to place the chip, get it placed here in position. And if you watch the last SOIC video, first thing I'm going to do is tack it down on the corners, just so that it's not going to move on me and I can do the rest of the soldering. So I've got it held down there. Hopefully I don't move it. Bring the soldering iron in here, get a little bit of solder, touch it there, and we've got that corner tacked, and we've got that corner tacked. All right, so it's tacked down now. Again, $15.88 Walmart soldering iron that anybody can get their hands on. Let's throw a little bit of extra solder on there and then see if I can drag solder with this tip. 1, 2, 3. Those runs are done. And then on this side here, 1, 2, 3. Need a little bit more solder there. Didn't quite get it loaded enough. And that's kind of heavy. You don't want that much solder on there, but it's soldered. And it's soldered well enough that you can use it. So I'm just going to clean my tip off a little bit. Just come in here and drag a little bit of that solder out if I can. No, it's not going to pick it up. All right, well, anyway, that's it. It's soldered. So that's what it looks like to solder a SOIC with a cheap Chinese soldering iron from Walmart. Now, I pushed those pins down, so let's go ahead and deal with that. So I've pushed those pins down because I like to do that. And what I need to do now is I need to solder those pins. So let's try and see if I can do that with this soldering iron. So where's my flux here? Throw a bit of flux on here. Get some flux. Like, you know, you can never have too much flux, in my estimation anyway. All right, so let's go in here and heat the top of this pin and pad right here. And it looks like it's going to heat it up pretty good. Yeah, it's sunk right down in there, so it's definitely heated it. Now we got a bit of a bubble going there, but we popped that bubble. Come on. Now the flux has burned off a little bit there, so I probably need to add a bit more flux to that to make it clean. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to solder the tops of those. Make sure that the solder goes down in between the hole and the pin. Come around here and do this one. Here, do this one, and I'm trying to touch the tip of the pin. There we go. So they're soldered. Now, what I would do at this point, because they're a little bit ugly, throw a little bit more flux on them. Clean the iron. And then just come across the tops of them just to clean them up. across the tops of these ones just to clean them up. There we go. So that's, obviously you can solder SOICs. So surface mount devices, and this is a pretty small device. Like there's my finger beside that device, so that tells you how small that device is. And you can solder it with a cheap Chinese soldering iron from Walmart. So this really is accessible to anybody. You can buy a $15 or $16 soldering iron. I tried to get a $10 one, but they didn't have that model, so I got this one. I think it's the same, just this one had solder and some other things with it. But it is achievable. That's the important point. So let's try a QFP and see if I can solder a QFP with this soldering iron.